What's good, everybody? Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I have no idea why the lighting's terrible. It's like overexposed today, but it is what it is. I'm going to answer all 100 plus questions today, so you're in for a treat. There's going to be relatively rapid fire. I don't have time to, well, I don't have the storage on my phone to make a 2-3 hour video. Maybe in the future you'll see that, but as of now, I do have to upgrade my phone. First question. Favorite metal bands? I would say Metallica. I still have to get a little bit more into metal, but I've been into Metallica for a while, listening to a lot of their stuff. I like the meaning behind their songs. It's just good music, too. Next question. Traditional pyramid training versus straight sets for bodybuilding, pros and cons. Pyramid training, it's good if you like variety and if you like to change things up, especially if you're feeling a certain rep range on a certain day. Straight sets, the pros here would probably just be convenience, and especially if you're using a dynamic progression system with your reps, it makes it a little bit easier to hit a certain proximity to failure and just know where you're at for everything. It's also very convenient because you don't have to adjust weights all the time. I would say that is a con for pyramid training, especially if you're using a plate-loaded lift, like a barbell, plate-loaded dumbbell, or a plate-loaded machine. And that's another pro of straight sets. But they both work perfectly fine. Importance of diet and cardio. How often should a natural lifter do cardio? How to increase work capacity. Diet is obviously, it's a very vague term, but it's obviously important that you have your total intakes down to meet your cut or bulk or recomp standards. Nutrition is obviously important too. Cardio, I personally don't do cardio. I feel like my lifting does a lot for me, especially on the lower body days. And I haven't noticed my conditioning drop off at all. So if I was to go on a hike right now, it's the same as when I was in high school when I was lighter and leaner and was playing sports all the time. So I would say just regular lifting does do a pretty good job. I don't think it's complete, but it does do a good job. I would say a minimum recommendation. This is going to be tough not knowing who this is directed towards and your training age and whatnot, but I'd say a minimum of 2 or 3 times a week for 15 minutes at a moderate intensity should be fine. To increase work capacity, I would slowly progress in shorter rest times between sets. Leading out's a big one, and then obviously doing cardio to increase your conditioning is going to be key. Favorite video games? I'd say right now, Chell has been my favorite video game for probably the past 10 plus years, probably 15 years at this point since I was a kid. I would say Warzone is not close second, but that's probably my second. Those are the only 2 games I play. Skate 2 and Fallout 4 are also up there in my favorites. I just haven't played them in probably 7-8 plus years. What are your favorite hobbies that aren't training related? I would say, yeah, video games. I don't play them that much, but probably 3 times a week for an hour or so. Yeah, chill. Warzone's pretty good. I like to do like weekend getaways, like camping trips, or just going to a new spot. I live in an area where I can do weekend trips pretty easily, and I don't have to fly. I can just do road trips. So yeah, those are up there. And yeah, the channel is obviously training related, but I'd say that's a pretty good hobby for me. I enjoy doing the channel. Would your training method work for someone over 50 years old? If not, how would you program for longevity? Yes, most of my methods will work for someone at pretty much any age. The way that I trained is it's a very passive form of progression. And I think if you're training properly, the progression will come. I'm not saying you can't just sit there and wait for it to happen, because there are variables that you do have to manually progress on. But I think my training systems would work well for most people. And I don't think being old would change that, especially with my emphasis on training every muscle, going through a full range of motion, and hammering your isolation lifts. That should work well, if not better than most training methods out there for someone that's 50 or older. What do you do when progression isn't happening? For example, when you can't reach your rep goal for weeks in a row. The first one for me, if I'm not reaching my rep goal for weeks in a row, it's probably I'm overtraining that certain muscle. And it's not that I'm necessarily doing too much volume, but it might be too much frequency. This typically happens with my back training, if anything, but I'd say for one, just have an honest conversation with myself. Is this muscle a priority? Am I training this as hard as I could, or am I just kind of going through the motions? That's the first one. If not, it's probably just a frequency thing that I have to tweak. Other than that, yeah, it could be a volume issue, but that's usually not the case. I can handle and tolerate and grow from pretty high amounts of volume at this point. Opinion on music and hype for the gym. I do think music has its place. I'm not entirely sure what you mean for hype other than like hyping up for a set, which I think can help. I prefer to lift in kind of a it's more of like a monotone way, if that makes sense. So I kind of stay, I don't get too high and I don't get too low. I kind of stay moderate, and I do usually listen to music when I lift, but I don't have to. Usually, not usually, but probably most of the time I lift, half the time I lift, I probably take my headphones out halfway through because I'm just tired of music, and I just lift in the dead silent in my basement. And I think that's a good place to get into, because sometimes music just starts to annoy me and I don't recognize it, and I get kind of like fed up, and I'm like, what's bothering me? I don't know, and I just turn the music off. So yeah, it has its place, but don't be dependent on it. Importance of micronutrients, as well as your go-to tips for increasing micronutrient intake. Micronutrients are definitely important for your health, and for go-to tips, I would say set goals of having X amount of servings of fruits and veggies per day, and just have them with each meal. They're not very filling. Like I used to have, usually, well, like when I'm cutting, which isn't that often, I'll typically go for a giant like fruit salad. So I'll just do like a quarter of a big watermelon, some banana, some oranges, grapes, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, set a goal. I'd say pick maybe 2 servings of fruit and veggies per day and just start from there and see how you feel, see what's working. What do you do for a living? Just genuine curiosity. Don't feel pressure to answer if you don't want to share such info. I am a mercenary. I do government contracts. No, I'm just kidding. I'll keep it confidential. I don't like to go too much into my personal life. It's nothing crazy. It's just kind of a regular job. Training and diet advice for obese and novice/beginner lifters. I would say focus on getting better at lifting and getting consistent in lifting. When it comes to nutrition and diet, set certain goals and make those goals your highest priority. You'll notice that once you can kind of get that trend going, and I've never been obese, so I can't necessarily relate to this, but when I'm cutting, the biggest thing that helps me to lose weight is to just set a goal and work towards that goal. Once you start to make even just a little bit of progress, you kind of quickly realize that the feeling that you get from actually progressing towards the goal is going to be better than the feeling of not going to the gym, which is, I think, the biggest issue with beginner lifters is not going to the gym. That's why I'm a proponent of doing kind of shorter workouts more often. Training and diet advice for obese, novice, or beginner lifters. I'd say the biggest thing for me here, and I've never been obese, so I can't necessarily relate to this firsthand, but when it comes to training, I would say go to the gym more often. I'd say try and go to the gym 5 or 6 times a week, and just use a certain program that doesn't overkill each session. The way I see it is to build a habit, you want to dabble in it each day. So go in the gym, practice your movements, get good at it, train hard, but don't stay there too long. Don't do a whole ton of volume, but go frequently. Frequency is one, it's good for muscle growth, but it's also good for building a habit. So I have a beginner template. It's probably like the 5th video I released on this channel. I would say check that out. That should help you a ton. When it comes to diet advice, the biggest thing for me when I'm cutting and trying to lose weight is going to be setting certain goals and having accountability systems. So I like to weigh myself every morning. I like to take measurements. I like to do this type of thing. You'll notice that once you make a little bit of progress, you're going to have a hard time falling for the moments of weakness when you know you have to weigh yourself in the morning. Because weighing yourself in the morning and losing half a pound or losing a quarter of a pound, whatever it is, that's going to feel much better than the moment of weakness where you start to overeat and have these big cheat days and cheat weekends and whatnot. That's my 2 cents for you. Next question, do you know of any female lifters or bodybuilders you recommend for training advice, etc.? Unfortunately not. I would have a hard time imagining there's not like kind of an underground female community, almost similar to a channel like mine. Yeah, unfortunately I don't watch a whole ton of female like YouTubers or influencers at all. So I wish I had more advice for you. I'd say the channel's kind of in like mine and in this kind of underground fitness community. They're all good channels, and I know you'll get a lot of good advice from these, but at the same time, it probably won't relate to you as much as if it was someone that is a woman talking to you that's kind of been through uh, what you've been through and able to give you advice and whatnot. And I know, yeah, a lot of it comes down to goals and personal preferences and whatnot. So I wish I knew of some good female lifters. It's just not usually what I spend my time watching. I watch guys lift. Um, what's your favorite color? That's far and away green. I do like tan too. So yeah, one thing you'll notice is I always have like a green hat on, and then I have, I don't know if you can see them, but these tan khakis pretty much all the time. I'm like a cartoon character. I wear the same thing every time. Actually, I feel like I remember someone commenting that on like my first video. It's funny. What are your thoughts on veganism, the ethical viewpoint? Um, my thoughts on veganism. This isn't something I've thought about too much, so take my words with a grain of salt. I don't have anything against veganism, and I think if that suits your moral code, then go for it. And I think that's a great thing. I've never tried veganism or vegetarianism. I don't eat much meat at all. Aside from chicken, I actually don't eat meat. Not for any particular ethical or nutrition oriented reason. That's just kind of what my diet's always been. So I don't have a whole ton of thoughts on veganism. I would say I do respect vegans for sure. I don't have an issue with it at all. And I also respect people that hunt for their food and people that homestead. I think homesteading is probably the most ethical way to do your food and kind of live off the land like that. It's not something I know much about, so I can't leave a whole ton of comments on it, but I would say that is something that intrigues me for sure, and that I would be interested in pursuing potentially when I'm older and have more free time. Next question: would you rather fight 10 badger-sized horses or one horse-sized badger? Well, badgers would fuck me up, so I would have to go with 10 badger-sized horses. Yeah, I could take them. Yeah, easily. Yeah, I could take them. 100%. No way around that. The badger-sized horse. No, the horse-sized badger, that would fuck me up so bad, though. Next question: how long should someone wait to see if a variable in training is having the desired result? For instance, if I have a certain exercise in my program, how long should I wait to see if it's actually giving me good results? Thanks for the videos. Thank you. I'd say it's tough because all variables are different. I'd say for exercise selection, 2 months, and you'll notice there's a lot of lifts, especially lifts like that kind of put you in a mechanical disadvantage, say something like a JM press or a plat squat, things like this. It actually takes a while to even learn the lift, even for someone like myself where I've been lifting forever. It probably took me 3 to 6 weeks to actually really get plat squats down and feel them working. So I have a hard time saying less than 2 months, because even then, if it takes you 6 weeks to learn the lift and then you only have 2 weeks to actually like make progress and see results on, I don't think that's quite enough. So I'd say minimum of 2 months, unless there's a negative aspect coming from that lift, like it fatigues you like crazy or you have certain injuries or pains from it, then I'd probably ditch it a little bit earlier, and it's just either not a good lift for you or you need to change your execution. All right, last one on this post. Question 1, you say compound lifts are a jack of all trades and a master of none. If this is true, why do we need to do them at all? For example, instead of doing shoulder presses, I can just do lateral raises and face pulls to build big delts. So compound lifts generally are going to be a jack of all trades, but they always have a prime mover. So there's always going to be one muscle that does grow pretty well from them. And I did make a video, it was probably back in July or August, breaking down which muscle groups are going to grow best from compounds and which muscle groups are going to grow best from isolation lifts. So for a muscle like your chest, the way that your anatomy works is your chest presses. So you don't have to, but if you want the best results for your chest, you do have to do compound lifts. And for your biceps are going to grow best from an isolation, since their function is to curl. So you don't have to do compound lifts. If you want to maximize your bicep growth, you have to do isolation lifts. So yeah, they are a jack of all trades, but they're always going to have a prime mover, and there are multiple muscles in your body that grow best from compound lifts, and it's always going to be vice versa too for other muscle groups. There's always going to be muscles that compounds can help, but are going to grow best through isolation lifts. So you do have to do both. They're different, and they complement each other really well. And question 2 from him: why do you never incorporate drop sets in your rep range video? You use the analogy of taking smaller steps to get closer to the wall, but wouldn't it make sense to take smaller and smaller steps each time you're about to get to the wall in order to get as close as possible to it? So If you're looking for like literal muscular failure to where you can't go anymore, I don't think that's the best way to train for hypertrophy, because at this point, it's like stimulus to fatigue becomes an actual, it does start to become an issue there, even with an isolation lift, because if you just fry your muscle in one set, the sets following that probably won't be that effective. So technical failure or muscular failure in that given lift with that weight is going to be key. But like you can't just, it's not practical to keep going and keep doing drop sets until you can't move your muscle anymore. I do like to do certain advanced techniques, like mechanical drop sets are going to be a big one for me. Partials after failure and cheat reps, these are going to be key. So I do use that as an advanced technique. But for drop sets, I also load plates for most of my machines and dumbbells and barbells down here. So doing a drop set's just not practical for me. I'm not against them, but I think there's more efficient ways to do advanced techniques. What are your thoughts on specialization phases for certain body parts? I think that's going to be key, especially as you get more advanced. Knowing what your goals are and knowing what your strong points are, or muscles that you don't care about that much, definitely put those on the back burner for certain phases. Like I'm doing that right now. My strong point and a muscle I don't care about much is my glute and hamstring area. So I haven't trained them directly at all in probably 5 or 6 months at this point. And that's given me more freedom within my program to up volume and frequency for other muscle groups that I do prioritize. So those are going to be key. Know what volume and know what frequency works best. Start with that and then slowly increase from there. Measure your results. That's going to be key. And then once you start to plateau, either change things up or reprioritize. For people with limited training time due to kids, work, family, etc., how do you go about making the most of your training time available? So what I'd say is giant sets are going to be key. Training from home is going to be key. And using the same weight for each lift is going to be key. So for stuff like this, I would say this is a good example of when not to use pyramid sets or reverse pyramids, because if you're changing weight all the time, that's going to eat into your time. And if you're just doing straight sets and you're not pairing it up or doing a giant set with another lift or two, then you're just going to be wasting more time with your rests. So I'd say supersets and giant sets, use the same weight. Use your rest times to load up weights for your next lift and get all that stuff set up. Isolation lifts are going to be key. As counterintuitive as that sounds, the rest time is very easy. They're so easy to superset and giant set, and you can just bang out really good volume. I'd also say know your priorities and know what you don't care about. Don't waste time training the muscles and the lifts that you don't care about. That's going to be key. That way you can actually prioritize what you want to. In one of the clips regarding arm training, you were mentioning doing 30 sets per week of arms. I'm wondering, is that 15 sets of biceps and 15 sets of triceps, or 60 sets altogether, just for clarification? I think in that video I was saying you can go up to 30 sets a week for biceps or triceps, and it still might work for some people. It's not necessarily something that I'd recommend, but I'm saying it is possible, and there might be situations where arms do just respond better to a little bit more volume than intensity. Thoughts on sport-specific training for athletes, for example, heavy sled pushes for football players and more unilateral leg work for hockey players. Seems like it could be useful. No crazy Instagram banned unbalanced plates, whatnot. I would say if you're a casual athlete, I don't know if I'd spend time doing that. I would personally just bodybuild and use that as getting the 75% of performance benefits that I'd need without going all in on sport specific and just having no bodybuilding results. But sport specific training, it is legit. Training for power and explosiveness and conditioning, that helps a ton. It's not going to change how your direct skill in that sport, but it makes you an all-around just stronger, more powerful, faster person. So I used to do strength and conditioning. It definitely helped me be a better hockey player in the past. How did you come to realize what was fatigue from the gym or any other type of tiredness from anything else? In my first year, trying to mainly build some muscle outside of what I build while playing sports, specifically soccer. Thanks. Thank you. Love your content. Thank you. Much appreciated. So fatigue is, that's a tough one because it depends what you're doing. I'd say if you notice more fatigue when you start to pick up lifting, that's probably an indicator that you're doing too much. Obviously, you have to measure your fatigue, but it's a situation where you kind of have to have a controlled period where you just, let's say you're doing soccer, and you have a physical job and you're lifting. How do you feel when you were just doing your physical job? Then how do you feel when you're doing your physical job and soccer? Then what happened? How do you feel when you're doing all three? And then you can kind of just measure from there. Using local fatigue can also help. Like if you notice that your biceps are super tired and you've been doing a bunch of curls, that's probably correlated. Do you think it's smart to do slightly more isolation sets for a muscle than compounds? For example, I'll do 3 sets of behind the neck press, then 4 sets of cable lateral raises in a session. Yes, in most cases. It might not be necessary, but you can definitely get away from it and potentially benefit from it too. Um, yeah, it's tough to, that recommendation, that answer is going to be different for everyone. So yeah, I'd say for myself, I do slightly more isolation than compound. And it's not because I don't do compound. It's because why not do more isolation? That's the way I see it. What are your thoughts on constantly rotating a few 3 to 4 similar exercises within your program, like rotating dumbbell rows, barbell rows, row, cable row, etc., while logging everything so you're never guessing what you do and where you're at? I know you're not a big fan of constantly rotating exercises. Keep up the good work. Really enjoy your content. Much appreciated, man. So yeah, what I'd say is that could be a pretty good method if you're someone that does like novelty and you do like to change things up regularly. I wouldn't be a fan of that for beginners because you do just have to practice your lifts. Lifting's a skill, especially when you're a beginner. So I would say the more advanced you get, the more you can get away with that, especially if it's how you enjoy lifting. That's going to be important. New to your channel and loving it. Love to hear you talk about this topic in more detail. I've always had some confusion when it comes to getting a sufficient amount of stimulus for hypertrophy. If you're doing 5 sets of 10, should you stay strict on the reps or should you push every set? I run into could I do more reps? But this is going to affect my reps in the following sets. Yeah, so don't sandbag your sets. I would say watch my video called Why I Prefer Dynamic Rep Ranges. I give an analogy talking about your proximity to failure. So odds are you're probably sandbagging your lifts. When you have 5 sets of 10, this isn't always the case with every lift, but I think in most cases you are going to see the first set of 10, you're probably going to have 3 reps in reserve. Second set, maybe 2 reps. Third set, 1 rep. Fourth set might be good. And then by the time you get to the 5th set, you're probably just cheating to get to 10 reps. So the way that I see it is rep ranges aren't high enough of a priority to actually take precedence over proximity to failure. You should prioritize a certain proximity to failure for each lift and then just do as many reps as you can while hitting that good proximity to failure with the right technique. So don't lock yourself in to a certain amount of reps. I've done that before and it doesn't work that well. It's not that it doesn't work at all, but you're going to have better luck doing dynamic rep ranges for sure. What are your thoughts regarding the indirect ab work that training with barbells and dumbbells give you? Does that make up for the fact that exercises don't have the same stimulus to fatigue ratio as machines? For example, deadlifts, high bar squats, dumbbell and barbell rows. The reality is these aren't going to build up your abs. I'm the perfect example of that. I had a very big squat, bench, and deadlift, and I trained them all often and hard, and I did that for a while, and I legit have 0 abs. Even when I'm pretty lean, you can't see them. It's because I don't have ab development. So the variables are too different. If there's a little extra benefit, but the stimulus to fatigue isn't what you need for your program, I don't think having a little bit of extra ab work is going to do a whole ton for you. I'd say just train your abs directly. Next question, what is your take on how society is progressing and how there's an influx of more adolescents getting into fitness and self-improvement? How do you see this impacting society going forward? So I think it's a good thing. When you have a strong sense of self and you've kind of mastered yourself and you understand what you need to do, now you're of use to others. So that's my ideas on this. I think we're in a spot where a lot of adolescents, especially my generation, is mentally ill and very weak. And at that point, when you're kind of becoming a victim to everything around you, that starts to become an issue because now you're not actually helping anybody else or yourself. When you can fulfill your purpose and become a better person. You'll fulfill yourself, and you'll just overall be a better person. And once you have that down, one, you feel good about yourself, and two, you're a good role model for others, and then three, now you have the capacity to actually lead and help other people. So yeah, everybody has to be strong, not necessarily in a very physical sense, but you have to be tough mentally and have the body that you want. Train for bodybuilding. That's why I do it. Next question. Do you think weighted dips could replace barbell bench in terms of strength potential and the ability to display 1-rep maxes? In terms of strength potential, yeah, for sure. I think any lift can really do that. And the ability to display a 1-rep max, I would say no, because one, loading is going to be an issue, and two, it's a body weight lift, so it's never going to be impressive because it's not as simple to compare. So you take a bench press, it's how much did you bench not including your body weight. 300, 400, 500, etc. When it comes to dips, you get into all these weird things where it's like, oh, well, I can dip 225 pounds and I weigh 165, and then you have the jacked guy that's like 250, but he can only add on 150 pounds to his dip. And now it gets all skewed, and there's never going to be a standardized competition like that. There's a reason it doesn't happen. Dips are a great lift. I'd argue they're probably better than bench for hypertrophy, but in terms of strength, there's a reason it hasn't happened. 100%. That it will never be a highly competitive lift. No chance. So you recently made a top 5 goals for 2023, training related. What are your top goals for your channel for that next year? For example, are you planning to monetize it or get any sponsors? What about the shirts? Were you joking about making on one of your podcasts? Also, are you going to be discussing anything other than programming and training on your channel, like NH, or will you keep it training only? So yeah, a few questions here. I would say top goals for the channel are just to continue to do what I'm doing. I think I'm in the groove. I think I've kind of found my niche. And obviously I want the channel to grow. The way I see it is I want it to grow and develop as much as I can for the people that need it, but I don't want it to go mainstream or get bigger. The good news is I don't have the personality to have a mainstream YouTube channel, so I don't think that'll ever happen. But yeah, that's the way I see it. I'd love to grow in this niche and grow in this community, but anything beyond that is just unlikely, and it wouldn't be the right fit. Like, can you imagine if this channel had 500,000 subscribers? Like, it just, I honestly can't imagine. That would just be weird. Not that I wouldn't want that. I mean, I think I would. Like, that would be cool, but I can't imagine enough people watching this type of video. I really can't. Are you planning to monetize your channel or get any sponsors? What about the shirts? I will never have a sponsor, ever, unless it's like a company that I already like. So if it's like Rogue, Titan Fitness, Orvis, LL Bean, like the last two aren't even fitness companies. Like I would work with a company that I already use, but I highly doubt I'd ever have a sponsor here. I've already turned down so many too. I just don't see a point in it. It's like, I'm here to talk to you guys. I don't want anyone intercepting that. The shirts, yeah, so I was on Damian Paul's podcast. I was kind of joking about just if I ever did merch or something, I'd sell flannels and green hats. I could actually see myself doing that one day just for fun. I don't think I'd probably lose money doing it, but if I ever have the time and I just want to do that, yeah, I'd probably sell I'd probably contact LLB and just set up some custom basement flannels or something. That would be cool. And then do you ever plan to discuss anything other than programming or training? Yeah, probably. I'm still young, so I'm cautious of putting out too much life advice and philosophy. It's something that I am developing as I grow and learn. But I'm very cautious of giving advice out to others because, yeah, training's something that I've been doing it since I was younger, and I don't want to say I've mastered it, but I'm excelling in fitness. I'm doing pretty well at it. For something like life advice, philosophy, that kind of stuff, I'd probably wait another maybe 2 or 3 years before I start to get into that stuff. But good question. Yeah, I do plan on expanding the channel in other ways for sure. I'm an older lifter, 56, still developing muscle, especially since I got away from the 3x5 big 3 mindset that's been advised for those my age. But do you think that I should train differently to you younger guys? It depends. I mean, all I know is your age. I would say I I I think the only thing you'd have to be mindful of is just any injuries and recovery. And once you have that down, I don't see too much of a reason to train too differently. But then again, everyone does train a little bit differently. So I don't think it would be anything drastic in my mind. Probably just starting with a little bit, maybe lower volume, a little bit farther away from failure, and just easing into it, especially if you're new to training. Are rest days overrated in your opinion? Are they actually necessary? Or are they mostly for people who just need a mental break from the gym each week? I like to train every day and never felt like recovery was an issue. So this is kind of a weird one. There's a couple philosophies that I have, and I'm not completely sold on either one yet. I think one, if you don't need any off days ever, you might not be training hard enough. And two is I just don't know with certain programs how necessary an off day in entirety is. Like for myself, the way I train, I could probably train every day and get away with it. But if you're doing more fatiguing lifts like squat, bench, deadlift, and you're already pretty strong, yeah, I'd say taking an off day is a good idea. No matter what I do, I can't seem to sleep more than 6.5 hours, even if I go to sleep earlier. I just wake up earlier automatically, and I can't fall back asleep or even feel tired. I never feel tired during the day. For context, I just turned 18. It's been a problem for years. I've never seemed to suffer recovery issues. My concern is whether this limits my ability to build muscle, even if I feel no other effects. I don't think that would be an issue. 6.5 hours isn't as low as it sounds. Everybody does kind of vary in how much sleep that they need. I find that I can get away with 6.5 hours, and that's almost like that's kind of when I wake up too. If you're growing and everything's fine and you automatically wake up at 6.5 hours, I think you're doing something right. You might just be someone that can rely on lower sleep and get away with it fine. I think it's just a genetic thing. Hello, bro. I'm trying to grow my chest, and no matter what, I can't feel my pecs when I'm doing any bench press movement. Do you think pre-exhausting chest on cable or pec deck flies and going to do dumbbell or barbell press will help grow it? I wish you a happy Christmas and great day. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. So I wouldn't worry about feeling your chest when you're doing presses. The only type of mind muscle connection I use when doing presses is the stretch. My guess is you're just not getting enough of a stretch, but even then, it's like if you're pressing, then you're probably fine. If your grip is too narrow, you're going to feel it in your triceps a little bit more than your chest, and if your grip's too wide on certain presses, you might feel it more in your shoulders, but go with a moderate grip, a few inches outside shoulder width, and get a full range of motion. Try like a hammer strength machine, try dumbbells, try an incline. Even on a barbell, incline will help you get more of a stretch. That's going to be key. But either way, don't worry too much about feeling your chest, because on a press, you just might not feel it that much. And that's for most compound lifts too. Have you ever tried any rib cage expansion techniques such as 20 rep breathing squats or dumbbell pullovers? Yeah, I did this back in 2018. I didn't track my progress. I don't know why I never tracked anything back then. I was just kind of an idiot, but yeah, didn't log anything. So I've tried it and I have no idea if it actually worked for me. I have heard people have success with it. It's probably something I'll mess around with at some point in the future, but I would probably track my progress this time, right? Do you have some tips to deal with impatience for bodybuilding but life in general? Yeah, so I have two good pieces of advice for you that I want you to take from this. The first one is going to be record your progress. Know what your best months are for lifting and how much you progressed on everything. Use that as kind of a rule of thumb moving forwards, and that way you know what your max capacity is at, so you can get a general idea of how long things are going to take. That is a very flawed method. Very flawed, but it can give you an idea, and that helps with patience. My personal favorite method of developing patience in my day-to-day life is, one, it's going to be focusing on habits rather than the actual goal, because when you focus on your actions day in, day out, you get caught up in the process, and then eventually the goal will come. Another one, I think this is going to be more important and very practical, is look at the past. So when I think back to 2018, 2019, 2020, it doesn't feel that long ago. And when you apply that now, where it's just about 2023, I know 2026, as futuristic as that sounds, is right around the corner, because 3 years ago, I remember everything. It feels like yesterday. So obviously, when it's 2026 and I look back to now, it's going to feel like yesterday too. So understand that time flies way faster than you think. Long term, you'll look back and you'll be like, holy shit, how did I get here? Even if the day-to-day feels kind of slow. So that's my advice for you there. Next question, I recently added plat squats to my program. Good man, I like it. I have 2 lower days. One is heavier squats in a 4 to 8 rep range. The other day is the plats in an 8 to 12. I can get more ROM on plats with lighter weight. Are the heavier squat days still worth doing, or should I just do the plat squats on both days? I have a home gym, so I'm limited to barbell and dumbbell movements. Thank you. I would say, yeah, I mean, 4 to 8 is a solid rep range for regular squats. For plats, yeah, 8 to 12 is good too. I probably wouldn't go below 7 or 8 reps. I don't really see an issue with doing both. Personally, I would do more plat squats. I do plat squats twice a week, and then if I wanted to bring up my posterior chain and my erectors, I would just do RDLs or good mornings or something. So that's ultimately my philosophy. So I'd say if you're trying to grow your quads from your squats, might not be a bad idea to do plat squats both times. What's your opinion on low to high cable chest flies effectiveness for upper chest and overall chest hypertrophy? So I'm not a fan of low to high cable flies. One hack to get around this is instead of just going from low to high like this, I would just do a split stance and lean forwards at whatever degree you want. So I'd step away from the cables. I would go forwards too. I would go into a split stance and lean. And that way when you're forwards like this, you can just squeeze your chest in front of you like that. It works pretty well. I would also recommend a dumbbell incline fly. I'd say a 30-degree angle is going to be best here. When you're just standing in the middle of the cables and kind of doing a front raise like this, most of the time your front delts are just going to take over. The line of pull isn't that good for your upper chest. This is a very overrated lift that I think a lot of Instagram influencers like because it makes them look jacked when they're doing it, but it doesn't actually give them any muscle growth. So that's my advice for you. If arms are a priority, most of the time they are. I think that a chest and arms, legs, shoulders, and back split is a better option than push-pull legs because with push-pull legs, they are hit at the end and they're also hit a bit during shoulders and back. Push-pull leg focuses on the torso. What do you think? Yeah, I'd have to think about that a little bit, but I would say, yeah, at first glance, yes, I would say that is probably better. Push-pull legs is kind of, yeah, that's going to make you look like a power lifter. I remember doing my push-pull legs. There's ways around it 100%, but your averagely executed written program is going to be very torso dominant and in legs too. But yeah, shoulders and arms it's not the best for. What can you say about the theory of myofibrillar versus sarcoplasmic training? That's not something I really care about that much. Just to be honest, I'm not going to try and lie and act like this is something that I look into a whole ton. I used to try and look into this when I was a little bit younger, but at the end of the day, it's like just measure your muscle gains from what happens, and whatever type of hypertrophy it is, it's muscle growth. So that's what I care about. Have you ever trained calisthenics? If so, for how long? No, I've never done calisthenics. I've done bodyweight movements and pull-ups and dips and whatnot and some push-ups, but that's something that I always have some form of that in my program, but I've never done purely calisthenics or tried any strength-oriented moves. I've just used weighted calisthenics or in certain cases body weight just for hypertrophy training. So pull-ups, dips, just the standard stuff that bodybuilders steal from calisthenics. How do you utilize exercise rotation? Do you recommend sticking with something for 3 weeks plus or changing it up every time? I don't recommend changing it every time unless, like I talked about earlier, you have a particular kind of like a mental itch for new things and that keeps you consistent and you're already a relatively experienced lifter and you know what lifts you're doing and you have experience with it in the past. I think that's okay. I would say as far as rotation, I just rotate. For myself, it's when a lift gets stale, and that's the most bro science thing ever. But you know when a lift starts to kind of slow down, you don't really feel it much, and you kind of get bored of it. That's when I personally rotate lifts, or if I want to try something new, or if I change priorities. I think for most people, when a lift really starts to stall out, and you've already gone through the checklist of making sure you're not just having an issue in your training, that's probably a good time to change out a lift. I'd say 2, maybe 3 weeks of not progressing is probably a good time to rotate, or if you're feeling some type of nagging pain or injury. But other than that, there's no universal magic code to this. It's so individual. So it's questions like that are frustrating because it's like I want to go answer it and I want to tell you exactly what's happening, but yeah, it's going to be different in every situation. As a main pressing movement for chest, do you prefer barbell bench or machine chest press? So I don't have main pressing movements. I just have movements. I prefer the machine press just because you can get more range of motion, and I think you can get closer to muscular failure, and it's also less fatiguing. Barbell bench is great, but I do slightly prefer the machine. But there's no main movements. Like if I'm doing a bench as a secondary movement, why am I doing it? They're all main. They're all priorities, and they all contribute in some way, shape, or form. So I don't like that perspective of looking at lifts as primary or secondary. I think that's a very powerlifter lens right there, and that used to cause me to not get anything out of my accessory secondary lifts, and I just wasted so much time doing them. Won't maximizing strength on a lift give a lot of mass to its primary mover? For example, maximizing your 1 rep max weighted pull-up will give you a big back, not biceps. Maximizing your bench press strength will give you a big chest, not triceps. I mean, yeah, like if you're getting stronger on a lift over time, it's going to be good. But if you have a perfect technique, great proximity to failure set of 6 to 20, that's going to give you more hypertrophy. So why chase the 1 rep max? Why not get the most volume that you can that makes you grow with perfect technique, good proximity to failure, that whole concoction? You'd be surprised how let down you are when you chase 1 rep maxes. It can definitely help grow the prime mover, but there's a single rep just doesn't give you enough stimulus for hypertrophy. It's really once you get past that 5, 6, 7 rep range that gives you enough time, enough proximity to failure, enough muscular failure. Like, that's the stuff that really gets you to grow. So I'd say slowly get stronger over time, but you can't just, if you're maximizing strength, you're leaving variables on the table to actually get you to grow. Just look at powerlifting and how unbalanced their physiques are. And I guarantee you, if those guys trained for hypertrophy, they could have the same size prime movers that they have. So pecs, quads, etc. They could get those muscles at exact same size at a much lower 1 rep max. 100%. Hello, thank you for taking questions. I have a shoulder injury. I'm trying not to bench much. It hurts. How can I build the chest while only bench pressing once a week? I'd say go get that checked out and find out what the issue is. Maybe experiment a little bit with lifts to see what feels better, but definitely get that checked out. I'm not going to give you advice on injuries when I have no idea what the injury is or who you are. What's your opinion on P ratio and nutrient partitioning? Is there a limit to productive bulk, or do you think as long as performance is getting better, go to 25% body fat? So don't judge your bulks based on performance, because your performance will keep going up as you gain body fat for the most part. And a lot of this is artificial because it's just from fat more than it is from muscle. I'd say cut your bulks off at 20%. So cut it there, you should be good. Hi, considering you train biceps and triceps twice a week, each different days of push-pull legs, would you say 3 exercises of 3 sets are enough? There's nobody that can answer this question better than yourself, or if you have a coach that's been with you for more than at least a couple months. I will not be able to answer that question. Some people can grow off 8 sets a week. Some people might need 25 or 30 sets a week of bis and tris. So my answer would either be a fake lie answer or just no answer. I'm going to go no answer. Measure your progress on your own, see what works best for you. That's my answer. How do you balance the rep weight progression with an increasing volume? It shouldn't really change. Shouldn't really change a whole ton with my method. The way I do it is, like, if I'm adding more sets, I would just increase my rep goal by the average amount of reps that I'm doing. But usually, usually that's what I'll do, yeah. Lots of people will say consistency will always trump inspiration, and this is a longer question. So basically what he's asking is consistency better than inspiration? And for me, I think you have to have some type of inspiration in bodybuilding. It's an uncomfortable endeavor and it is difficult. So you obviously, if you're doing the right programming and the right training consistently, that's going to do good for you. But if you don't have any inspiration or like mental focus and it's not a priority for you, you might still plateau. I'm not saying you're going to, but you might. You see this all the time with 90% of people at your typical commercial gym. They go in, they do the same thing every time, and they're super consistent, but they look the same year after year after year after year. So I would say, yeah, and I talked about this before, where it's like, as great as discipline is, you can't just rely on consistency and discipline if there's no there's no passion there. I think that's very important. So you have a point. They're not. It's not one or the other. It's that medium of both. That's going to be key. How do you advise someone with a low T to bulk, given that the rate of muscle building will probably be slower than average, with less overall potential, and nutrient partitioning will favor fat storage? I, from what I can tell, your testosterone levels don't necessarily determine how much muscle mass you're going to put on, or how much, or what your potential is, for that matter. So unless you have like a medical condition where you have abnormally low testosterone, like well below the normal range, and it's an actual health issue, you might be placeboing yourself into not making the right gains. I would say, just, if anything, just do a slower bulk so you don't gain a whole ton of fat. But I think in most cases, in most people that are worried about low testosterone, I think you're just gonna, your reaction to knowing that you have low testosterone is going to impact you more than your actual low testosterone. In other words, if your doctor told you your testosterone was 3 times what it actually is, I think you'd make the same gains as if it actually was 3 times what it is. I think it's that one's very, very mental. What's the largest land animal you think you could take in a fight? I think I could take definitely a giraffe. I do think I could take a giraffe easily. Yeah, not even a question. I could beat the shit out of a giraffe. Can you do too much forearm isolation work, or could you potentially work them every day training with enough variety? So yeah, forearms, you look at people like blue collar workers that do a lot of work with their hands. Those guys actually, a lot of the time, they have pretty jacked forearms, and they train just a little bit every day. It's kind of like a greasing the groove type method. So that could be due to some nucleus overload, but I do think that forearms are best trained frequently. I train mine 3 times a week, and I train them hard. If I was going to train them every day, I do think you could run into wrist or finger or elbow issues. So I'd say, yeah, if you want to train them every day, do kind of like a grease the groove type method. If you're going to train them regularly, I'd say 3 times a week, train them hard. I don't like to do a whole ton of volume. I do about 2 or 3 sets on a couple different lifts, and I push them like hard, way past failure. Tons of mechanical drop sets. It's just like, it's ruthless. It's so painful. I heard it's safe to do pull-ups every workout. Is that possible? And can same be said for cable rows? It depends on the rest of your program. I'd say it's safe. Yeah, it's safe. I don't know if it's going to get you the best gains. I'm not sold on the full body every day. I'm not sold on that at all. I think for beginners, it could work because you'll get noob gains from it, but I'm not sold on that yet. I do think rest time, rest days and recovery, I think it's going to help you out. There's a reason why most of the best lifters and bodybuilders give themselves rest days and usually train at a 2 to 3 times a week frequency. Have you ever had to deal with tendonitis? If so, what methods did you use to deal with it? Is there anything you keep in your program to prevent tendon pain? Someone responded to this saying Alec Onkiri has a great video that he watched. I would say, yeah, check out Alec Onkiri's video. I'm not going to try and give you an answer in a rapid-fire Q&A. I train 4 times a week, 2 pull sessions, 2 push sessions, and I spread legs on every day. You worded that weird. So I guess it's a full body. The question is, do you think that training 1 heavy knee flexion front squat, for example, and 1 heavy hip hinge RDL, for example, a week, and then the other 2 days volume 3x8 on the same exercises is enough? I would probably steer clear of doing that on the... I would steer clear of doing that much low back work in the same week. I'd say put your RDLs and your leg work on the same day. 2 days should be perfectly fine there. I've tried deadlifting. Even deadlifting twice a week can start to mess up your lower back, messes with your recovery. So if you're going to do that stuff, just put it all on the same day. You can have 1 day where you prioritize the hip hinge and 1 where you prioritize the quad stuff, the deep quad stretch. Is bulking and cutting better than being fluffy and going between slow bulks and recomps? Depends on the person. I actually kind of go more on the latter there. I prefer a slow lean bulk and then a couple months on recomp, but I don't know. It depends on the person. A lot of people have had success with both, so I've had success with both. I know that for sure. So yeah, it's there, no, neither is better. Just depends on the person and it's preference too. When training purely for bodybuilding, how exactly is progression tracked? Do you just add more sets to the exercise if weight on the bar isn't moving up? How do you know when you have to keep adding sets in order to progress? I know you do many sets for your forearms. Do you just try to achieve more volume over time, and that is what your progressive overload is dictated by? Not really. I don't think overloading on volume is a reliable way. I think it's something that's necessary, but if, like, there's only so much volume you can do, and more volume isn't always better. So you can't just keep going on volume forever. I'm not a fan of volume waving either. I would say hypertrophy is tracked through muscle measurements, progress pictures, body weight, body fat percentage, strength progression in whatever progression that you're using, and technique consistency. And then as far as weight on the bar moving up, that's just one of many variables in progression. So what I'd say for you is the weight on the bar not moving, or is everything not moving? What are you focusing on at the moment? Are you in a new rep goal system? Are you trying to progress in reps? Are you trying to refine your technique right now? Are you trying to add more volume? Are you trying to add more weight? It's one of many different things. And if I would say take a step back from that one variable, look at everything. Are you progressing in any way, shape, or form? Are your training variables improving? Are your measurements, progress pictures, and body weight and body fat percentage improving or on track for what you need them to hit? I would take a look at that. What's your take on calisthenics and body weight training? Is it all hype, or can you really build muscle and get big from it? You can definitely build muscle and get big from calisthenics. It is incomplete, and it does lack some variety. So it's not optimal, but you can still get big from it. But if bodybuilding is your priority, I would lift, and you can still do calisthenics too. There's certain bodyweight movements that are great. I would just say you can do it, but it's not the best option. What does your bulking diet consist of, and do you play or have played any video games? Yeah, I talked about video games earlier. Bulking diet it's a few different things. Oats, even PB&Js for extra calories, lots of chicken, rice. I'm not a foodie. My stuff's so bland. I like cucumbers, not that that's particularly for bulks, but that's something I usually have for my veggies. Other than that, for bulks, I'm trying to think what else I'd add. Greek yogurt's a big one, and I'll put a bunch of like protein granola in it because that's super high in calories. But other than that, that's probably my like kind of go-to bulking foods, I'd say. Opinion on gymnastics rings plus a pull-up bar for home gym. That's a great start. It really is. I would probably add adjustable dumbbells, and then you can even get a cable tower. I have one right behind me right here. It does not take much space up at all, and it gives you a ton of variety. They're also pretty cheap. I think it's like $200 and change. That's a good option if space is a consideration. That's a really good one actually. But yeah, for pull-up bar and rings, it's a solid start. Are overuse injuries a concern with safe hypertrophy lifts if one trains all the muscles but uses the same movements for months or years on end? It depends on, one, the person, and two, it depends on the lift. So I think some people are simply just more injury prone than others, and some lifts are more prone to giving you wear and tear than others. I think this also depends on your experience as a lifter, so your training age. Like you take someone like myself, where I'm just not to jinx myself and watch me get an injury next week, but I've never like had an actual injury before. I'm very injury resistant. I've had certain aches and pains, but it's never like, I'm not an injury prone person. I know people that get snapped up all the time. For myself, I can get away with like keeping the same lift in forever. And some people do have to rotate maybe every 6 to 8 weeks. So it depends on the person, depends on the lift, depends on the training age too. How to manipulate sets for hypertrophy, when or why to lower or increase it. What if I want to prioritize some muscles over others? So when you're manipulating sets, that to me is if you're decreasing a set, if you're decreasing your total amount of volume, aka your total amount of sets, that's if one, you're not recovering from the amount of volume that you're doing, and it's just overkill and the high volume just isn't working for you, or if you're putting that muscle on maintenance. If you're increasing volume, it's just a reverse. So you're either putting a muscle that's on maintenance back to regular volume, or if you're increasing from there, I would slowly increase. Let's say you're doing 10 sets a week for your chest and you're recovering fine and you're just starting to plateau. Try going up to 11 sets than 12 sets. Don't just jump to like 15 or 20. That just might be overkill, and you won't get any of the adaptations that you need from that slow increase to what would be probably your future growth volume. And then what if I want to prioritize some muscles over others? Yeah, I mean, I kind of actually answered that one already. So I would say, yeah, if you want to prioritize some muscles over others, learn how to put muscles on a back burner. Learn what your minimum volume is. You can slash it right off. You don't have to like decrease slowly over time. I would find your best movement, one that probably isn't going to take a whole ton of energy and fatigue, one that you can easily superset in, and just kind of like you train it, but it doesn't really affect the rest of your program. Like if legs are a low priority for me, say quads, I'm probably not going to just do like low bar squats for 5 sets and just take up that much space on a leg day. It will probably be something I can set up quickly, easier recover time, something like probably a hack squat. You don't have to use a whole ton of weight. The rest times are a little bit lower, and it just hits the quads very directly, and I probably wouldn't do a whole ton of volume there. If let's say 3 sets is normally what you do for each lift, I'd probably just go down to 2 sets, or even just one all-out set can maintain muscles pretty well. What's the quickest way to bring up arms, such as best frequency, volume split, etc., even if it comes at the expense of other body parts, such as not hitting some body parts in order to free up recovery? I would say, 1, make sure you're training your arms hard. Don't just tag them on at the end of the workout like most people do. Pair them up throughout your entire workout. So if you start off, let's say you're on an upper body day, do a push with a curl. After that, if you're hitting back, do something for back and pair it up with triceps. Ideally, train that arm lift before you train that torso lift. Take it just as hard, push the intensity, slowly add frequency and slowly add volume. Arms, there's no need to just ramp up volume like crazy and go from like 9 sets a week to 18 sets a week. I would say let's say you're doing 3 sets of curls on Monday and Thursday, and you're doing 6 sets a week, try 3 sets of curls plus 1 variation for 1 set on Monday and then 3 sets on Thursday. Then 3 sets plus 1 set of a variation on Monday and Thursday, and slowly kind of increase from there. Make sure you're training them hard. Take some sets past failure. So do some partials, do a mechanical drop set. Push your arms hard. Treat it like any other lift. There's nothing special about it. Just don't treat them as an afterthought. How do you manage working out while doing a tough manual labor job where you find yourself skipping meals? I've never had like a tough manual labor job, so I won't have the best advice for you, but what I would say is meal convenience is going to be key. If you're skipping meals, you're going to have to pack something convenient. So PB&Js are great. Making like high calorie weight gainer smoothies is always going to be great. Just find a method and build a habit for you there. In working out, I would say know your personality type. I would recommend 2 options. I'd say either pick 2 or 3 days a week to just go in and dedicate like a 1.5 hour, maybe 2 hour session and just absolutely crush it, or do like a 40-minute session 5, maybe 6 times a week and just bank on that frequency. Either way, those could be good options. Find what's best for you and make sure you have strategies to get your meals inconsistent. So meal prep, pack stuff the night before. Smoothies are super quick. Add peanut butter to them, add oats to them, that kind of stuff. That's going to be key. Now that you train in the morning, do you eat beforehand or train fasted? If I'm bulking, I will have 2 breakfasts. I will have 1 breakfast before I train and then 1 after. When I'm recomping or cutting, I don't eat before I train. I just train fasted. I hate it and it sucks, but you got to do what you got to do. I'm just not hungry that early in the morning. I don't have enough time to make anything either. It's just not ideal. What's your favorite ab exercise? Good question. I'd say lying leg raises are a good one for me. I like those. I don't really like ab training though. I've never been huge on getting abs. They're something I kind of had before I started lifting when I was just a skinny guy. So I just you don't care about what you already have, right? Good old psychology. Your opinion on bulking as a skinny fat with low weight but high in body fat percentage? I would say either cut down or just recomp. That's probably your best bet. I don't know your actual body fat percentage or the way you look, but for your average, probably skinny fat beginner, that's probably what I'd recommend. And you can still progress either way. Like, you can still build muscle in a little bit of a deficit or while recomping as a beginner. Just practice your lifts, get good at them, and crush it in the gym. Your body comp will follow that too, especially if your diet's in check. Minimum intra-workout set amounts for high-frequency training. I would say it depends so much on the person. For high frequency, I'd say the minimum you could do each time and still grow is probably 2 sets to be optimal, but asking for volume and sets, it varies so much from person to person that it's like no recommendation is, I just don't, I don't know. Unless we were working one-on-one, or if I knew you as a friend, it's like, then yeah, it's going to be tough to give you some advice there. Are you planning to do diet topic videos? Maybe. Not my area of interest, but maybe. Carbo loaded pump looking full, bro. Hey, appreciate that, man. How to grow hands and finger muscles, overall hand thickness. I'm not sure. It's kind of funny because I have like the world's biggest hands. I'm 5'10". My hands are probably as big as people that are 6'10". They're just like oddly, it's really odd how big they are. But my they're not thick. I have like long, thin fingers. It's really strange. I would say I don't know how much you can grow your hands. You do see a lot of the guys that do like the grip training, their fingers kind of callus up and thicken up. So I'd say get really into like grip training and arm wrestling type training and see how that goes for you. A lot of them, I don't know if I don't know like the cause and effect relationship between the two, but they might be onto something there. Although I prioritize the major muscle groups over hands. Do you prefer belt squat or leg press for hypertrophy? Leg press. Should we recommend people on the taller side to just ditch the big three altogether if the goal is maximizing hypertrophy? I would say modify the big three. There's nothing special about the big three, guys. Modify them to suit your needs based on your leverages and what works best for you. It depends on the build of that taller person. Standing barbell finger curl for forearm gains is okay? Yes. Why would one who doesn't participate in pageantry place hypertrophy and aesthetics over strength and athleticism? What if you train for strength and athleticism but you don't play a professional sport? You know, it's the same both ways. So I think it's ultimately, as cliche as it is, you're training to be the best version of yourself, and I do think bodybuilding has strange standards, competitive that is. Like, why I don't see why you have to get so lean. So it's like, why am I catering my own personal goals to suit the ideals of someone that's judging that? So now I'm not actually pursuing what I want. I'm chasing what other people want, and I'm skewing my personal development towards what someone else thinks is better suited for the sport. Not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. What is your goal for next year? Just made a video on that. Can you grow a big neck naturally? Yes. Favorite TV series, The Walking Dead. Black Mirror is also low-key great. Are you a fan of Kabuto Yakushi? This is going to make a lot of people disappointed. I don't know what or who that is. What music do you like? Bishop Gun and Metallica is pretty much all I listen to. Favorite video games? This is like the 4th question I've had on that. How can I do neck training without looking like a dweeb? I heard if you close your eyes, no one else can see you. Home gym tour walkthrough. I did one a while ago, but I haven't done an update. I don't think I've had enough changes to the gym to warrant another one. Thoughts on OMAD? I don't have experience with it. I have heard there are health benefits, but it probably isn't ideal for bodybuilding, especially if you're bulking. Hi, I went magician show and magician asked for volunteer. I only raise hand because Vegas girls up there have lots of milk and pecs. A magician guy cut me in half with a saw and make legs disappear. It 8 days down, no legs yet. Can I get legs back? Yeah, yeah, go for it. I'll give you some of mine. Last comment is king, not a question. Holy shit, I did it. This is like 110 questions or something stupid. That is an insane amount. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you all soon.